President. I wanted to thank the board for the participation in our CSEA week. It was very successful, and I want to thank the district for the release time that they've granted our membership to participate in the activities that we have for that week. It's very generous and it's appreciated. CSEA does not take a break over the summer, so we will continue to meet with administration. We meet bi-monthly, every other week, and talk about issues, and we appreciate that also. So we're looking forward to the summer, we're looking forward to a new fall, and it's a good place to be. So have a good evening.
Thank you, Teresa. Don't feel bad. I don't take a break in the summer either. Gotta work all year round. The Police Officers Association. No report. We'll move on to the Management Association.
And good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Baxter. I'm presently the Management Association President. As CSEA, we continue to be at steadfast work. Managers, directors, deans, and vice presidents, we're all part of the same management association. With that said, I'd like to take a moment to further address what President Patelli said about the faculty's assessment of administrator surveys for this evening. As a management team, we don't believe that any constituency group should be engaging in evaluative surveys of other groups outside of agreed upon evaluations, let alone sharing those results in the public. There are processes and procedures established through board policies, administrative procedures, and agreed upon collective bargaining agreements for employees to discuss their concerns with supervisors. Furthermore, all constituency groups are represented in the participatory governance committees that the district has, such as College Council, EMPC, or FMPC, to name a few. And it's in those participatory or shared governances that process for implementing the college's policies regarding budgeting, hiring, and resource allocation are developed in a collegiate manner. The management team is and always has been committed to working with all groups, including certificated and classified professionals, senior administrators, and students to create and maintain open channels of communication so we can have a continual quality improvement here at Merced College. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And last but not least, ASMC.
Good evening, board. My name is Cody Camacho. I am the ASMC president. Yes, once again. ASMC has quite a few goals for this upcoming school year. One of our main goals is to really make sure that we're participating fully in the shared governance process. In ASMC, we believe that all governing bodies should be held accountable for their actions, and we believe that that is accomplished through transparency. So we'll be working towards that. Also, we will be having a retreat in August this summer to train new officers and work on a strategic plan for ASMC. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody, and welcome back. Believe it or not, we've missed you. Okay, all right, board. Item 9, consideration of consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions on the agenda? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion by Trustee Ochoa and a second by Trustee Upton. Get that, Denise? All right, so now, are there any comments from the audience? Any questions or comments from the board? All right, then let's vote. Oh, and then we go to the student trustee first, and then you will say yes or no, or yay or nay. So, Trustee Gill, how do you vote? Yes. Okay. So the student trustee votes yes. So far, so good, Denise. Has everybody voted?
Yes, they have, and I just have, I'm sorry, I don't have no little.
Take your time. We get till 11 o'clock tonight.
I don't know why it's not going through.
You can read it right here if you need to.
I want to see if this works. I am sorry.
There it goes.
Oh, there it is. We got 7 yeses, 8 with the student trustees. 6 yeses. Oh, one abstain. Yeah, okay. 6 yeses and 1 abstention. So, moving to the next round. Oh, this isn't America's Got Talent. Okay, so motion passes on to item 10. To the board for discussion and/or action. Item A, approval of proposed new Music College mission statement.
Yes, thank you. This may seem like deja vu. I think you guys approved a mission statement about a year ago. But we realized quickly after the approval of the new mission statement, Dr. Ellison brought it to the attention of the district that we were oversimplifying our mission statement and did not include the required components from the Accreditation Commission for Community College and Junior Colleges. And so after consideration, deliberation, we took it through the master planning committees again, including the Educational Master Planning Committee, which is our super committee, if you will, that oversees the master planning for the district. We had a subgroup work on aligning that language with that of the proposed new language of the mission statement. And the new mission statement proposed is growing our community through education and workforce training, lifelong learning, basic skills, career technical education, transfer, degree certificate programs, and ensuring student success through equitable access, continuous quality improvement, institutional effectiveness, and student achievement. And the reason it was developed and written in this way is because mission statements should be memorable and you should be able to use them. And so this meets the required components of ACCJC, but it also gives us really an intro that we can all remember, and that is growing our community through education and workforce training. And that is something that we will use and recite and ingrain in everything we do.
So the clear basic message is that first sentence.
That's what will be emphasized. The entire statement is our mission statement. The beginning is really the emphasis, and the rest is very much so our mission. But we will use the beginning as an emphasis in many of our publications. It aligns with our new branding study, and we'll use it in many different formats to make sure it comes to life as a part of our mission here on campus.
It hit me funny with the way the bullet points are in there without a real, it doesn't flow. It flowed better when you read it than when I looked at it, but it's just kind of, just an Englishy person is supposed to bother me that. I'd rather say it with comments.
Before we get into comments, let's do, we need to get a motion. We get a motion in a second, and then we'll open up for comments. A motion on the board? A motion by trustee Rivera. For second?
I'll second.
A second by trustee Ramirez. Is there any comments from the audience? Okay, now back to the board.
If I can respond to Trustee Lashbrook, there was some discussion about taking out the colon and putting in the word through, using more commas, which we certainly can do. I mean, it was a matter of formatting. So if we were to do that, I think half of the group felt strongly that it read a little bit more clearer, or it read clearer in this format. But nonetheless, it could easily be changed to growing our community through education and workforce training, through lifelong learning, comma, basic skills, comma, and then all the way through, and then even a semicolon, and ensuring student success through equitable access continuous through the end. So we can put it in its traditional format, and I think that there was some train of thought in that regard. Dr. Adam was actually the chair of the subcommittee. Do you want to provide any insight?
Yes, sir. What is going on is, can you hear me? Or
Go ahead and come up to the podium, please.
Thank you. What is basically going on is the ACC-JC WASC will hold colleges accountable, and they have a rubric where they measure each one of these goals, like career technical education or transfer, or so on and so forth. So what we did was we looked at the rubric. In addition to, we looked at a bunch of our peer institutions, and there are people who are using statement-like, and there are people who are using bullet. But we went through the process in the college, the academic senate weighing, all the shared governance across weighing, and debated on the content and so on, and this is just a distilled version of it. Again, the board can choose to edit and do this, but the key thing is we need to meet the compliance. If not, what will happen is we'll just get into unnecessary issues.
Well, to me, just the word through would make it flow. It's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
stop, chop, chop, chop. I don't know. I'm just having, it wasn't reading well to me. That's all.
I agree with you, Cindy, but Dennis is our English major. I claim to be an English major. I'm wondering what the subject is. It's one sentence, really.
And see, and I'm not an English major, but I really like the way it's broken up, because I feel like sometimes you see one long sentence and you kind of doze out, as you start to read, even if it's, and I like complex sentences, but I think if it was one sentence, it would be really long. And so this kind of breaks it up for me. So I like this format.
It looks like one sentence. There are a capital at the beginning and a period at the end and nothing in between, really. But I'm not an English major, so
Yeah, I don't mind bullet points, but can't we still do a comma through colon or something? It just doesn't read.
Briefly, we can.
Trustee Ramirez, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I also agree with Trustee Ramirez, and I do have a question for Dr. Adam.
Yes, sir.
We live in a very cultural, county. Our community is very diverse. So I'm wondering if diversity was ever part of your discussion.
Yes, we looked at that too, but if we include diversity, then we will have to include like distance education and all kinds of things. So what we are trying to do is not to economize words, but the key thing is meeting the basic minimal requirement of the rubric. And again, we can go against the ACC-JC, but I don't recommend that.
So the intent was to have a short and concise
Yes.
mission statement.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
In the vision statement, which is different from the mission statement,
Yes.
doesn't that address the diversity issue as well?
Yeah, again, we can, we are looking into planning processes, strategic initiatives, and all kind of stuff in the future. So we can expand on that. I totally agree with you. It's the service area is extremely diverse, and the diversity is continue to grow, and it is extremely valuable. And I understand, of course, I'm diverse. A clear example, not just the students but staff too. So we honestly look at diversity. We look at distance ed. We look at many other initiatives. But the key thing is this mission statement captures the core mission of the college. Again, mission started, I don't want to lecture, but mission started with the California Ed Master Plan of 1960, and it has been evolving and so on and so forth. But now this ACC-JC is in the game, meaning that our mission should be measured up. Again, for example, I wanted to take out institutional effectiveness because it's like self-serving because I'm Dean of Institutional Effectiveness, but the key thing is it was debated and argued that, you know, that is how we measure our programs and services and everything else. Yes, sir.
I know that we're kind of used to looking at a paragraph and seeing a paragraph, but this kind of, if you look at it, draws your eyes to those bullet points, the emphasis in the first sentence, and then the bullet points. You stop and pause and actually look at them and think about it. So, you know, I kind of like the way it's set up, even though my first reaction was, hey, but this doesn't look like a paragraph.
Well, I would be against adding the word through at the end of that first line because you already have the word through. Growing our community through education and workforce training through, that doesn't flow either.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
If there's a strong desire, I mean, these are all conversations that the Educational Master Planning Committee had too, and like I said, it was pretty mixed, very comparable to what it is at the dais tonight. We can, you know, we can certainly add a word if you feel like it flows better. Since you use the word through, I guess we could use the word with or including. We plan to use the beginning as a tagline, so you know, to break it up, to put it into a large paragraph might it might hinder that possibility. But if we're talking one or two words here, we're certainly open. I don't want to bring it back. I'd rather move forward and know that UB can always amend the mission statement. So, is there a word that would, besides through, that you feel comfortable at the end of that?
It just doesn't look like a heading, but, I mean, I don't know. I like the bullet points, but it just doesn't hit me right. So,
You have suggestions? Do you guys have suggestions? You were all involved in the process.
Well, I think maybe just a way to view this a little bit, based on some of the conversations at EMPC, and then I had with my group as well. And Chris has mentioned it. The first part is the tagline. So that's the before the colon is what's to create institutional buy-in, recognition with our community partners and the community at large. That's the identification for Merced College. It'll be on our agendas and things like that. The after the colon is the compliance. That's our checklist to make sure that we're providing everything ACC JC wants. It's not necessarily how we would be consistently reading our mission statement in every operational meeting. I mean, when I look at it, I look at the quotes around growing through training and thinking that's going to be at the top of my SSMPC agenda. It's going to be for my SAM meetings, things like that. The bullet points are really how we're getting to them, how we're growing our institution. So I don't know if that helps, but I know that is some of the conversations that were occurring and why this formatting was considered the choice by most of the committee members. Yeah.
If I may, it was mentioned previously by Dr. Baba, Adam, that the compliance piece was standard one of the ACC JC self-evaluation report requires a mission statement that has these components. And it's also part of the eligibility requirements for an institution like Merced College. So it is important that we do reflect those elements in our mission statement. Otherwise, we do run the risk of, how should I say it, the wrath of ACC JC during our next team visit.
I'm just not happy with the punctuation, I guess. Basically, does not flow.
If it's just punctuation, then I think we're not too.
Yeah, I guess we could maybe think about that, maybe somebody can come up with a big brainstorm.
Could we make that a friendly amendment to the motion that if we find a way to make this flow better with one word or two, that it doesn't, if we don't change the intent of the mission, then we, with approval tonight, we'll discuss in cabinet, there's a way to make that flow a little better and read a little cleaner. And we'll make that change without bringing it back to the board.
That sounds fine with me, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It just, it'd be that way.
So,
So we need
whoever,
to add that to the motion then
who made the motion initially? Was it?
it was Lynn and
So-
So Denise, it would read that minor verbiage to help with the flow of the mission statement may be made as long as it doesn't change the intent. May be made by administration, as long as it doesn't change the intent of the mission.
I believe the maker of the motion needs to accept
Yeah, he
the
said,
friendly
yeah.
amendment.
Trustee Varela did accept the amendment to the motion. And so we have an amendment to the motion and we have a second. So Denise, are you ready to move on? Okay, so, student trustee, Mariah, how do you vote?
On the amendment?
Yes,
Aye.
well, yes, the entire motion. The amendment,
She knows more about the process than we do.
I vote yes on the amendment.
okay,
And then I also vote yes on the motion. I would just like to say that I completely agree with Vice President McCandless in that with our mission statement, it's more about the substance and the specific goals that we have addressed rather than just minor grammar issues that we may have. So I vote yes.
all right, thank you. And the rest of us will vote.
is it showing
It showed up a lot faster this time, you're doing
up?
something better.
Like yours by 11 o'clock on my tablet.
We're done by 10:59.
Just waiting for one more.
Okay, that's unanimous.
So it wasn't unanimous, I voted no.
You want to know? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't have my good glasses today. Trustee Ramirez voted no, so it was 6-7, including the student trustee. Okay, so moving on to item B, 10B, proposed 2017-2018 tentative budget.
Good evening, everyone. Is this? There we go. Okay, what we'll go through very quickly tonight is the process timeline, the current status, then we'll get into the revenue expenditure assumptions, reserve assumptions, and then there'll be some questions. The basic process of developing and building a tentative budget is one where we gather as much data as we can on revenue assumptions. If we didn't have information from the May revise, which it was really close, that we might not have it by the time we actually had to take this to the budget committee, we would do it on the best information that we have. The budget managers' meetings have all occurred prior to the tentative budget being prepared. This time we looked a lot at cutting the budget for the current year, but we're also looking at support for the program outcomes, aligning the budget strategic goals, meeting the ongoing needs of the department, all of those, identifying department budget savings, which is what we did mostly in the meetings. Receive feedback on new budget ideas. These first few days of 410s always cause the tongue to do weird things. So anyway, also providing input on possible district savings ongoing. We did all of that prior to developing the tentative budget. Where we are right this second is we'll be presenting tonight the tentative budget, which is the budget that is designed not to be the final budget, not to be the end-all be-all, and not to include everything that we know, but to get the college started in July 1 with funding. It's required, otherwise we can't function once July 1 hits, because we have no budget to do that with. So that's what this is for. It's presented to the Budget Committee prior to coming here. It's also been presented in an abbreviated manner to EMPC. The tentative budget provides the operational budget. So we're not looking at categorical programs, we're not looking at the other programs, we're looking at our operational budget, what we have to do in order to be able to provide classes when fall starts. The final budget will, when the information comes out from the state, which should be any minute now. We're hitting this meeting just before the final budget will be passed by the legislators. They're fairly close. The Chancellor's office thinks the governor's going to win on most accounts, but that will remain to be seen when the actual budget comes out. It's been kind of quiet from Sacramento, actually, which can be a little scary. Usually they're talking a lot and we get a lot of news. We haven't gotten any in the last couple of weeks. All of the information that you're about to see this evening is subject to change. When we get to the final budget, we will have closed the books, and I might have that in here. We're going to skip this one because I thought Joe updated it, and Joe thought I updated it, and consequently nobody updated it, so we're going to take this one right out. Where we go from here is the state will pass a budget. The district will close the books. Adjustments and accruals will be made as appropriate. The audit will be completed. The 311 Q and the 311 annual will be completed. Fixed costs will be reviewed that were not necessarily known at the tentative budget. The resource allocation process will be complete. Planned expenditures will be discussed and added. We'll update the revenue assumptions and the expenditure assumptions based on the final budget and everything that's plus the reserves. That's what will come after we walk out of here tonight. So we're going to talk, Joe is going to take over now and talk about the assumptions for both revenue and expenditures, and maybe even the fund balance.
Good evening. So looking at our revenue assumptions, again, based on the governor's May revision, there was a COLA included at 1.56%, which would equate to about $836,000 to the district. In addition, we're looking at a system-wide base allocation increase of $183.6 million, which would come to approximately $1.6 million for the district. There's also 1% enrollment growth included in the budget. We did not include any growth funds in our tentative budget. We don't anticipate that we'll be growing, growing beyond our base, and so we haven't included any growth funding again. EPA funding, which is the Education Protection Account, looking at about $7.8 million, which is relatively close to where we are this current fiscal year. And the next item is state mandated cost reimbursement. This is funding that's based on FTES, and we have received right about $250,000 for the last several years. This is entirely separate from the one-time mandated cost reimbursement funds that we received over the last couple of years, to the tune of about $6.3 million. So this is separate from that. And for the one-time funding, there was no allocation for that for 17-18. And this slide just looks at some of the major revenue components that are included in the budget. Our largest portion of the budget is our general apportionment, about 80% of our budget, over $33 million. Again, the EPA funding, general lottery funding. We receive lottery funding for general operating expenditures, as well as restricted lottery funding for instructional supplies. So this funding is only the general portion and excludes the restricted, which is part of our categorical program. property taxes, and enrollment fees, which all make up our general state apportionment funding. And those numbers will, they'll continue to evolve as we will receive our second period adjustment report, our P2 report, probably by the end of June. And so we'll have a better idea of where our funding is going to be for 17-18. That P2 report is what we use as our basis going forward to complete our final budget. And this just shows the breakdown of our revenue categories, federal, state, local, transfers in. And so if you look at our total revenue, it's not much higher, it's less than 1% higher than where we're projecting to end for 16-17. A little less than $61 million. And just to point out, if you're looking at our transfers in for 16-17, you'll see that it's over $1 million that we're projecting, and then down to $475,000 for 17-18. The biggest difference for that is in 16-17, where we've utilized quite a bit of funding from the one-time dollars. We had over $600,000 transferred for our CSEA raises. And so that, again, was coming from the one-time funds. And usually those transfers in only highlight indirect costs that we receive from grants and administrative costs. So that's why you see under 15-16, we only had $166,000. And that's in the ballpark of where we would usually see that revenue account line. So moving on to expenditures, looking at our FON, our full-time faculty obligation number. The advanced FON, the number that we received was 179.7. That number will again be updated as we move forward in the budget process, and we'll update that number for final budget as well. And right now we do have quite a bit more faculty included in the budget. I think up to 194 faculty are included in the budget. Not all of those are filled right now, but those are the positions that we anticipate filling for the year. We've included adjustments for step and column and longevity, right about $590,000. We have rate increases for medical benefits, about a 3.4% increase. And for active employees, that's about $187,000 increase, just strictly based on the rate increasing. For retirees, although we did have an increase in the rates, there was a decrease in the number of retirees that are covered. And so that's why you see a net decrease there of about $18,000. And our dental rates actually decreased and went down, which was a surprise. Relatively minor amount, but we'll take everything we can get, $21,000 decrease as a result of that. Vision rates stayed exactly the same, so no change there. PERS and STIRS, as we've discussed several times, the rates for both of those continue to increase and will continue to through fiscal year 2021. And so for both of those, it's about over $500,000 increase, just strictly based on those rates continuing to rise.
And Joe, can I ask a question? In the future, like maybe on the presentation next year, next to the dollar amount and the increase, can you give us an estimate of what percentage that is of the total budget for that line item? For example, SISC medical increased to $186,000. Is that 5% of the total cost? Is that 1%? Is that 20%? Okay. Just so that we can get a relative idea of the trend, please.
Yes, definitely. And then we're also projecting salary and benefit savings of about 1.5 million, and that's down from what we had projected and included in the final budget for 16-17.
Joe, will you explain to the board what you mean by salary savings? That doesn't necessarily mean we're saving that money in lieu of, but during transitions and others.
Exactly. So we have, I mentioned, budgeted positions that are included but are not currently filled. So at the longer that those positions remain unfilled, those are salary savings that accrue to the bottom line. Individuals that leave during the year, there's a time frame for when those positions are filled, and so again, those salary savings are captured there. What we've tried to do over probably the last 5 or 6 years was capture those salary and benefit savings on the front end of the budget so that we would try to build a more accurate picture of where we think we will end up. In the past, when we did not capture them on the front end, then it appeared that we were in a much better financial position early in the year, and then at the end,
Much worse.
it was much different. And so that was cause for quite a bit of contention in looking at our ending balance and our ending balance percentages. And so we tried to change that by capturing those savings on the front end and estimating what we think they're going to be. And you know, they fluctuate quite a bit over the years. This is the expenditure side, and you'll see at the bottom, total expenditures are close to the same as what we're projecting for the current year. And that's even with all of the increases that we're looking at. There were several positions that were included in the 16-17 budget that we knew we weren't going to fill, and some of those positions were removed from the budget. And so there's always a variety of moving parts in the budget, and so I've talked primarily about the different increases that we'll see, but on the flip side, there are some additional decreases that have occurred as well. And so based on the tentative budget, we are looking at exceeding the board designated 6% reserve. And we're looking at, for 16-17, we're looking at coming in at about 7.38%, and relatively close to that for 17-18 at 7.4%. For 16-17, we're projecting an ending fund balance, a net loss based on the third quarter. We're looking at a net loss of about $350,000. And again, that number will continue to be updated as we move through the end of the fiscal year and close our books. For 17-18, we're looking at a very slight net income of $46,000, which is not very much, but it's better than a deficit. And so that's where we're looking at based on, again, through our third quarter for the current year and through the May revise for the budget year. And just a couple of things that the budget does not include are any planned expenditures or resource allocation items and any departmental budget augmentations that will be submitted in the next couple of months. And so this is just looking at, based on our projected ending fund balance of $4.5 million, showing the 6% reserve, which would equate to about $3.6 million, and then the balance of that is left over for any one-time needs or carryover amounts. So that concludes the report. Any questions, any additional questions?
I got a question, Joe. I think on slide 8 or 9, there was the income to the college, and one of them was the property taxes. Over the last few years, property values are increasing. Have you seen an increase in that item?
Yes, we've seen an increase on the amount of property taxes that we collect locally, as well as the amount that the state projects that we're going to receive. And where that comes into play as far as what the state projects is the higher the state projects our property tax revenue, then the lower our state apportionment funding is. So the fact that we receive more property taxes does not necessarily benefit us. It just decreases the amount the state has to pay us. But yes, we have seen an increase in the total amount we receive, as well as the estimates that the state includes in their reports.
So the state doesn't let us have more money? So they don't.
No. That would be nice, but no, they do not.
Wow. Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Trustee Gutierrez, I do have a question for Mr. Allison.
Go ahead, Trustee Joe.
The carryover amount of $870,000, are we able to use that for the planned expenditures, resource allocation, department augmentations that are not in your budget?
Exactly. Yes. That's what those funds are set aside for.
Okay. I just want to add, Joe mentioned that our ending balance is a deficit of approximately right now $352,000. Keep in mind that, and that's a projection, so when we do our closing of all the books over the summer and bring a report back to you, it could be more, it could be less. The hope is that it's less, of course, as we sweep every account and see where we actually fall. But I want to put that into perspective. 2 months ago, we told this board in our district that we were looking at a $2.7 million deficit based on a miscalculation of the district. And it has been a tremendous effort of admin services, of our managers, all of our budget managers, and us as a district being very creative to reduce it from around 2.7 million to 352,000 that you see today. And I also want to go on the record to say it's our intent moving forward that we always build a balanced budget, and that very rarely will you see a deficit coming at the end of the year. That's our goal. Can't ever say never, because we will go through tough times again, and that's what reserves are for. But we're going to do our best to get out of the cycle of deficit spending. So we can do innovative things in the district, and we can honor those who work really hard in this district and do the work of serving our students. Just want to put that in perspective.
And one last thing, I just want to point out that I think Dr. Schultz mentioned it, but this is only reflective of our operating budget, our operating fund, unrestricted general fund, which is our Fund 110. This does not include the board designated fund, which is also an unrestricted general fund. That's where we house all the one-time monies that we receive from the state. So that's entirely separate and is not included as part of this presentation at this time. It'll be included as part of the final budget, but not for the tentative budget tonight.
Okay, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So I'm glad to hear from President Vitelli that deficit spending is something that we want to get past, and I'm glad to hear that. And I think I might be sort of one step maybe too far, because my question was going to be, when did the board set the 6% reserve, and is that adequate? We went to a training, and I think that the goal was somewhere around 15%, which might be too far out from us, but is 6% still a good number for us to use, or one step at a time? But that's kind of where I'd like to have a response.
This is a very debatable topic. I'm sure that many in the district would say, of course, 6% is enough. And then as administrators and trying to build our rainy day reserve, much like the state has done, we know that is what got us through a very difficult time. I mean, at one time, our reserve was hovering around 18-19%. And so, no, 6% would not sustain us very long as a district. In fact, Joe can give you the specifics of how many months it would sustain us. We do need to work towards having a larger reserve. It's a tough balance though, because we've been going without for so long. And so I want to publicly say to this board that yes, we want to try to build up our reserve again, but going without for so long can also impact the morale and engagement of our workforce. And so as we build our revenue sources, as we build growth, as we see increased revenue coming into the district, we need to balance the need to think long-term, but also short-term. And that comes in many forms, and I won't get into the specifics, but our constituencies have waited on the sidelines for us to get out of the cycle of deficit spending, and that's part of it. Technology has suffered, infrastructure has suffered on campus, and so we just have to balance those two. But Joe, can you talk about the history of the reserve, also how far that would get us, and also tell them the minimum that the state requires?
Well, just looking at the budget for 17-18, our total expenditures are right around $60 million. And so that averages to about $5 million per month. And so as you look at the projected ending fund balance for 17-18, that's not going to get us very far at all. Not through 1 month on average. We have had some very high, relatively high ending fund balances over the years, and as Chris mentions, it has been a serious point of contention, and it is my view as well that is what helps sustain us through those tough times over the last several years, because without having that high of an ending fund balance, we would have had to take some real drastic measures, as you saw occur in other districts across the state.
Yeah, the state has a recommended reserve level of 5%, and when you drop below that, the state starts taking a look at you a lot harder and putting requirements on you. It's not a law, it's not part of Title V, it's not any of that, but it's an area where they start looking much harder at a district if you drop below the 5%. When we first did the first downturn, right before I got here, that first year, the college in 1 year lost $3 million, overspent by $3 million. This fund balance would not get us there. It would get us through that, but we'd be below the 5% and in trouble.
Jane?
Chris, do I remember correctly, or not wrong, isn't there something written in the contract if we have over 10% in reserve, we have to pay faculty more?
You're referring to the faculty agreement, and that was from what I can best interpret, that was a 1 year for that year. But I hesitate to say much more than that because I don't want to interpret for MCFA either. Yeah, that is in the current contract, correct? Yeah.
And so, President Vitale, I appreciate what you said. What I said about having a larger reserve is something that I think is a good goal, but I also don't mean to take away from the need that we do have to balance out maybe what we've been lean on for the last few years. So as long as we are aware that our eventual goal where we'd like to be is somewhere more than 6%, and when we can take steps to get us there, as a district, that we take those steps, I think that would be really the point that I was trying to make. So thank you.
I remember when I first started, like in 12, 13, we were, I don't hear this anymore, but we were going into borrowing money. What was that thing called?
The trans program.
And we haven't been doing that, so I think that's a good sign.
It is. I mean, the trans program that's not necessarily a negative thing at all. It just does provide us some cash flow assistance during the year, but it has been a positive that we have not needed to participate in the program for, I think, the last 3 years. And so, yes.
Okay, any other questions for?
Church Secretaries, I do have one more question for Joey. Back to, for Mr. Allison. We go way back. So back to Church Secretary's discussion about property taxes. The National Association of Realtors says that the average real estate cycle lasts about 8 years. And the experts are projecting that we're due for an adjustment. So can you go back to when we were at the bottom of the market, maybe 2010, 2011? What was the revenue back then from property taxes?
Well, I don't recall what it would have been just for property taxes, but overall, our total revenue from the state was significantly down.
So everything goes down?
Everything goes down, yes. So typically, the property taxes go down in line with overall state revenue. And so that decreases at a similar rate as our overall revenue. And so it's just another component of the reduction of state revenue that we received during those times. We have, up until last year when we had a positive net income, we had 4 or 5 years of deficit spending. And those first few years were significant amounts, over $3 million. The next year was over $2 million. And I think it was right around a little less than $1 million the following year. And so, again, without having those fund balances available to sustain and absorb all of those deficit spending years, then the district would have been in a significantly different place than where we were and where we are now.
So I got a dumb question. So back in the lean years when the real estate was down and our property tax revenue was less, did the state make up the difference?
No. Well,
That's what I figured.
The state does some interesting things with property taxes. If property taxes come in higher than the Department of Finance estimates, then they reduce the apportionment that we get. If property taxes come in less than what the Department of Finance estimates, they give us what they call a deficit factor. We are not guaranteed the reinstatement of those funds. However, the lean years, what was causing that was not, property taxes were a part of the component, but that was really a workload reduction, where they told us, you are going to serve less students, and they gave us less per FTES funding for it. That's what was really going on there. So yeah, property taxes played into it. It was part of the overall economy, and it was causing the whole state to be drawn down. So.
Okay, I think we're good. All right, thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Joe. So, yes, do I hear a motion to approve the proposed budget?
I would move to approve the proposed budget as presented.
Second. So we got a motion to approve by Trustee Ramirez and a tie for second by Trustee Jordan and Trustee Upton. So you can pick either one, Denise. And so any comments from the audience? Okay, no more comments from the board, right? No comments from Julie? No, okay. So, student trustee, how do you vote, Mariah?
Aye.
Student trustee votes aye, and the rest of us will vote. And it is unanimous. Okay, moving on to item C, authorization to award bid number 2017-08 for the Arts and ITS roofing project. Who's handling this?
It's just recommended that you approve this. This is to repair the issues with our roofing in both of these buildings, and it went out for bid, and this was the lowest bid.
All right, can I entertain a motion? Got a motion by trustee Varela and a second by trustee Ramirez. Got that, Denise?
I'm getting there.
All right, take the time. It's only 7:30. Any comments from the audience?
I have a question.
Okay, now it's the board's turn. Go ahead. Ryan.
When is the repair supposed to happen?
When is the repair supposed to happen?
Well, it depends on the building. The ITS building will be done first because it has the least amount of disruption to students and activity. And we're working with the College for Kids group to try to figure out how we can best do the one in the art building. It is the most extensive and has the most problems, but we are trying to work around the schedules of College for Kids and the start of the semester. It'll probably happen in that week before the start of semester.
Will it be done before the rains?
Well, that would be the goal.
It's supposed to rain in 2 weeks.
It won't be done before that.
There's rain coming.
That's what I hear, but that will not happen. I can guarantee it.
Okay, as long as it's done before the winter. Trustee Varela was first and trustee Ramirez was second. Okay.
Trustee Gutierrez, I do have a comment.
Go ahead.
I just want to publicly say that I'm very happy to see 4 bids on this job.
We do our best on these.
And it always surprises me when one of them is super, super high. It makes me think somebody read the package wrong, but never know.
And are these companies local or close? Okay, so.
I can find out. They're in Fresno.
Okay. All right.
Trustee Gutierrez.
So yes, question?
I'd like to make a comment. I am really excited to see that we're making repairs to our wonderful college. It definitely needs some love. There's different areas that we can work on in the future. But I would also like to say that I would like to see us vetting our bidders, and I would say specifically in this case the chemicals that they used to seal the roof. They're using a urethane foam, and I know it's kind of hazardous, and you mentioned the College for Kids. We're trying to work around those schedules, so if we could be mindful of that in the future and try to work with companies that are using non-toxic chemicals, if possible, whenever possible. Thank you.
I'm sure that would be looked at as well, and sometimes if you use other non-conventional material, it does drive the price up probably, so you gotta kind of balance that out. And I agree, the college, there are a lot of improvements throughout the college that have been happening slowly, but we're getting there. So we're ready to vote? Mariah, how do you vote?
Aye.
And the rest of us will vote? And Denise, you get the motion and the second by the same trustee. Just a little comment. You can fix it. But it is unanimous. You want to fix it now before we move on?
I did, I just fixed it.
Okay. Oh, there it is. It's fixed. You're fast. D.
This is the second reading of the board policies that are before you. It's recommended that you approve the proposed board policies. They've been vetted through College Council, and they're being brought to you for the second time per our policy.
I move we approve.
We have a motion by Trustee Jordan.
Second it.
And a second by Trustee Ochoa. Any comments from the audience? Any comments from the board?
I have a comment. On board policy 6620, which is about naming of facilities, buildings, properties, and programs, and I think I've mentioned this before in open session, is that naming of significant buildings and assets of the college is a really big deal, and they are really kind of legacy kinds of buildings, and sometimes they can bring legacy level gifts. So I guess I would just like to make it clear that for this trustee, I would like to make sure that we take special consideration in trying to prioritize naming or designation of areas, that we take a look and see whether or not a gift in exchange for that honor is a good strategy, as opposed to Carmen was a nice trustee, let's name something after her. So no, you gotta get the money out of me first. So anyways, I'm kind of making a joke, but that's really sort of the sentiment that I have, and that kind of comes from my experience on other boards. We recognize that people have time, talent, and treasure that they can dedicate. We appreciate their time and their talent. We love their treasure. So.
If we get somebody with treasure to sponsor the person that's...
And that's great. We've done that where people donate large gifts in honor of somebody that they knew, and I think that works beautifully too.
All right, thank you. So we are at voting process. Where we're at? Lost track a little bit. Okay, Trustee Mariah Gill, how do you vote?
Aye.
And the rest of us will vote. And it is unanimous.